Before silk and cotton painted Japan's landscape with softness, there was hemp, Ase, rising tall and pale under the sun. The air of medieval villages shimmered with its scent, clean, earthy, almost sacred. Women stood at wooden looms, their fingers pale from river water, weaving threads that whispered of wind and prayer. In a world where purity was divine and simplicity holy, hemp cloth became more than a fabric. It was a treasure. A piece of Asa meant dignity, devotion, and survival. Hemp has deep roots in Japanese history, literally and spiritually. Archaeological findings trace its cultivation back to the Jomon period, around Moi BCE, when early settlers twisted its fibers into fishing nets, bowstrings, and garments. The plant thrived in Japan's temperate climate, growing tall within months, needing little more than sun and soil. For ancient farmers, Asa was a miracle crop, fast-growing, resistant to cold, and endlessly useful. Its fibers were used not only for clothes but also for ropes to pull carts, curtains to divide space in wooden homes, and nets that sustained the coastal villages through fishing. Even paper used in sacred texts and lanterns was sometimes made from hemp's inner bark. As the centuries passed, Asa became more than a plant. It was a foundation of rural life, an emblem of endurance. In many regions, entire communities were built around its seasonal rhythm, sowing, soaking, stripping, and spinning. By the medieval era, hemp fields covered vast stretches of land, their pale stalks swaying like silent prayers. It wasn't luxury that made Asa precious. It was necessity, purity, and the way it bound people to nature's quiet strength. To grow hemp was to follow the rhythm of the earth. Seeds were sown in spring when the soil had warmed, but before the heavy rains. By midsummer, the stalks towered over the farmers' heads, turning golden as the season ripened. When the colour deepened, they were cut by hand, bundled, and left to dry under the open sky. Then came the ritual of transformation. The stalks were soaked in cool river water, their rough outer bark softened until the inner fibres could be peeled away. Women, kneeling by the stream, stripped and combed the threads, their movements precise, patient, almost meditative. The raw fibres were then dried, split, and spun into fine strands by twisting them with damp fingers. Weaving began on wooden looms set near windows for light and breeze. The sound of the shuttle, the soft thud and slide, was like a heartbeat in rural homes. Each bolt of fabric took days, sometimes weeks, to complete, and when it was finished, the cloth gleamed faintly white, light as air yet strong as rope. This was not mere labour. It was devotion, to purity, to balance, to the spirit of work. Every inch of Asa cloth carried within it the breath of summer, the patience of hands, and the quiet harmony between people and the world they lived in. Hemp cloth was unlike any other fabric known to medieval Japan. It was light but durable, breathable yet tightly woven. In a country of humid summers and cold winters, Asa's natural fibres provided both comfort and protection. The fabric absorbed moisture quickly, resisted mould and dried fast, a quiet miracle in an age before soap or electricity. But what truly made hemp valuable was its purity. Its fibres, naturally antiseptic, were believed to repel impurity, both physical and spiritual. For farmers, it was the ideal working cloth, tough, cool, and forgiving. Yet only the simplest, coarsest versions were within their reach. The more refined grades, bleached until almost white, smooth as river silk, were reserved for monks, nobles, and priests. A bolt of fine Asa was a luxury, requiring immense skill and time. The process of bleaching demanded repeated washing under sunlight, until the fibres turned pale and soft. These pristine textiles were prized not just for their beauty, but for their symbolism. To wear white Asa was to embody purity, restraint, and discipline, the virtues most admired in medieval Japan. Thus, a simple hemp robe could distinguish class, devotion, or humility. It was both everyday wear and sacred garment, depending on whose hands wove it and whose body it graced. In the weave of each thread lay a quiet paradox, simplicity that only the devoted could afford. In Shinto, Japan's native faith, purity was not a moral state, it was a cosmic one. To be pure meant to be in harmony with the divine, free from the dust of the ordinary world. And no material expressed this ideal better than hemp. At shrines, thick ropes called shimenawa, made from twisted hemp, marked the boundaries between sacred and profane. They hung across gates, altars, and trees, shimmering faintly under sunlight, a reminder that the invisible world of spirits, kami, coexisted with the visible one. When priests performed purification rituals, they often waved hemp tassels or wore garments of undyed Asa, symbolizing a soul cleansed of impurity. The connection ran deeper than ritual. In ancient myths, the goddess Amaterasu was said to favor hemp as a symbol of light and renewal. When darkness fell upon the land, offerings of hemp and rice were made to coax her return. Even farmers mirrored this belief, burning hemp stalks at midsummer festivals to purify the air and ward off misfortune. To the people of medieval Japan, hemp was not just a crop, it was a conduit to the sacred. Each baobab was thought to hold a fragment of purity, linking human toil to divine grace. In its pale threads, they saw both the fragility of life and the eternal rhythm of cleansing and rebirth. In the countryside of medieval Japan, hemp was everywhere, woven into the rhythm of daily life. Farmers wore coarse Asa robes while working the fields, merchants carried goods tied with hemp ropes, and fishermen trusted their lives to hemp nets that cut through the sea like threads of resilience. It was the silent backbone of survival. Every home had its own relationship with the plant. Mothers wove small towels or headscarves of hemp for their children, soft yet enduring as tokens of protection. During festivals and weddings, pure white hemp cloth symbolized sincerity and binding fate. A bride might receive an Ayase garment or a length of fabric from her parents, blessing for strength, honesty and simplicity in her new life. Even death was marked by hemp. Funeral shrouds were often made from undyed Asa, returning the body to the earth in the same purity it once emerged. Between birth and death, this humble fabric accompanied every stage of existence: work, prayer, marriage, and mourning. To the villagers, it wasn't just material, it was memory. It was continuity. A piece of cloth passed through generations carried the spirit of those who spun and wore it. In the texture of hemp, people felt the endurance of family, community, and the land itself, a living thread that stitched human hearts to the quiet eternity of nature. By the 10th century, hemp had become more than a household fabric, it was currency. In many provinces, bolts of Asa were accepted as payment for taxes, rent, and even dowries. Records from medieval Japan describe exchanges where a single roll of fine hemp cloth could buy a bag of rice, a goat, or tools for a farm. Local daimyo and temple estates relied heavily on hemp production. Villages were taxed not only in grain but also in woven cloth, which was then redistributed to the capital or used for trade. A well-made roll of Asa represented weeks of labour and became a form of stored value, a cloth coin of the pre-monetary age. This economy gave rise to strict quality standards. Inspectors would check the tightness of the weave, the whiteness of the fibre, and even the scent left from the river where it was washed. Villages known for superior hemp gained prestige and protection from local lords, but it also created pressure. Families were often required to meet quotas, spinning long into the night to fulfill taxes in cloth rather than coin. In these rural homes, the loom was both a source of pride and burden, a symbol of how beauty and survival were forever interwoven. Through trade, tribute, and toil, hemp became not just a fabric of the body, but the fabric of Japan's medieval economy, a quiet treasure woven from the patience of countless hands. For centuries, hemp ruled Japan's wardrobes long before silk or cotton became common. Silk, shimmering and soft, belonged only to the nobility, its production limited, its cost extravagant. Cotton, meanwhile, was a latecomer, arriving in larger quantities only around the 16th century, spreading gradually through trade with China and the Ryukyu Islands. Hemp filled the gap between the unreachable luxury of silk and the future comfort of cotton. It was the silk of the common people, strong yet elegant in its simplicity. Its fibres carried a natural sheen that caught light like a muted pearl, giving even humble garments a quiet dignity. Unlike silk, hemp did not demand wealth, it demanded effort. The strength of one's fabric depended on the precision of the spinning, the patience of the weaving, and the purity of the water used to wash it. Every robe, every curtain, every rope carried fingerprints of human labour. When cotton spread across Japan, it brought softness and ease of dyeing, but also signalled the fading of hemp's dominance. Farmers found cotton easier to process and more profitable. Yet even as Asa receded from the market, its spiritual and cultural weight endured. People still saw it as the fabric of purity, honesty, and endurance, a material that embodied the soul of an older Japan, when simplicity itself was sacred. Hemp's legacy reached far beyond the loom. Its pattern, the asanohara, a geometric motif shaped like hemp leaves, became one of Japan's most enduring artistic symbols. Found in temple carvings, samurai armor, and kimono fabrics, its interlocking hexagons represented growth, protection, and the strength to rise again after hardship. Mothers often wrapped newborns in cloth printed with the Eise no Hei pattern, praying that their children would grow tall and resilient like the hemp stalks that reached toward the sky. The motif also appeared on family crests, signifying purity and fortitude, virtues that bound the living to ancestral honor. Artists and monks saw in the pattern a reflection of nature's mathematics, a balance between strength and beauty. In Buddhist temples, it adorned sliding doors and paper lanterns, its repeating symmetry echoing the eternal cycles of life. Even today, the Eise no Ha motif survives in modern design, on clothing, architecture, and crafts. As a quiet homage to the Sasa spirit of endurance, it reminds Japan of its roots, a civilization built not on luxury, but on grace, discipline, and respect for nature's geometry. In every repeating line lies the same message that guided medieval artisans, that beauty begins with balance, and purity is strength. The decline of hemp began quietly, like a season changing. During the Tokugawa period, Japan's rulers encouraged the cultivation of cotton, praising it as a more efficient crop. Fields once golden with Eise were ploughed over for the softer plant, and the ancient rhythm of hemp weaving began to fade. In rural villages, the loss was more than economic, it was cultural. Generations of artisans who had memorized the feel of fiber between their fingers saw their craft vanish. The songs sung beside the riverbanks, where women once washed hemp threads, grew silent. The looms, once the heartbeats of wooden houses, stood still and gathered dust. By the 19th century, hemp cloth had become a rarity. The Meiji government's modernization policies, which sought to replace old materials with industrial products, restricted hemp cultivation even further. What remained survived only in remote regions, where monks and shrine caretakers continued the old ways. A fine roll of hand-woven Eise became a relic, preserved in temples and museums like sacred scripture. It was admired not only for its craftsmanship, but for the discipline and patience it represented. A lost virtue in the face of mechanized modernity. Hemp, once the fabric of a nation, was reduced to whispers of memory, woven only by those who refused to let the sacred thread break. Hemp cloth is more than a fabric of the past. It is the spirit of Japan itself spun into thread. In each kaiya lies the union of earth, water, and human patience. It reminds us of an age when the simplest things were treated with reverence, when every thread was a prayer for balance and purity. To touch Eise is to feel the pulse of history, the strength of farmers' hands, the devotion of weavers, the quiet faith of priests who believed that purity could be worn. Its whiteness is not merely a colour, it is an idea, a belief that what is clean and honest is divine. In a world that values speed and abundance, hemp speaks of endurance and humility. It tells us that treasures are not always glittering metals or silken robes. They can be rough, simple, and born of labour. When the wind brushes through the fields where hemp once grew, it carries the echo of those ancient looms. It whispers that beauty lies in perseverance, that purity is strength, and that even the humblest fibre can hold the soul of a civilization.